we were the main commodity before tobacco and doggone cotton came in, that we literally had to work, and which made America America. Now you go even now. So when she's saying that, I'm like, you want to talk about 2% when 100% of the U.S. was built and benefited off of enslaved people. Then you want to take that 2% and majority of that 2%. Okay, let's do it down to our 13 colonies, because that's the majority of enslavement still maintained. That still shrinks it down to now what you about a 6 to 10%. I said you can micro that down to doses as well. So when she's saying this, I'm like, you're trying to get rid of accountability. So when I hear white people like this say this, all I hear is you're trying to negate the accountability of white supremacy system, because you know in 2025 you still think like that. So you're trying to say, oh, it wasn't as bad. No, white people all bad. This is a woman who has a Haitian daughter.
Right.
Now, is she teaching her the facts about how Haitian got their liberation?
Nope.
Or how they got colonized? This is a woman who told you, I have a half Latin son. That's why I say I don't buy into the intersectionality that black people want to stay in, because this is a gay woman who got like adopted children of color and as a female, right? And none of them intersect for her to think that you are worth saying this is wrong. And before she said, I got a list here of all these museums. You're talking about somebody who's traveled the world, and I like history. I've sat there and seen Columbus's own journal. So you tell me the white people that wrote about the history was lying on themselves when they said they sold me, they raped her, they pillaged this. They're not lying on their own. That even when you got archaeology and scientific research telling you what's going on, the white people lying on their own research. They don't want to accept accountability. And that's the problem. History does not tell you all white people are bad. History wants you to learn from it. That's why they're stripping it. They're telling you the Trail of Tears was a pilgrimage. That's what these new history books are saying. But who controlled the message?
So, hey, real quick
hold on.
No,
go ahead.
No. I got to rebuttal some, not what she's saying, but what the young lady said in the thing she said 2%. So, however, some statistics are available with analysts. It says about 5% of individual slaveholders states were considered slaveholders based on census data. When looking at the household in the slaveholding states, it's established that roughly 20% owned enslaved people. Expanding to the broader perspective, 25% of all Southern household owned enslaved
That's what I say,
people.
your 13 colonies.
So once again, real quick, right? I'm a history buff too, right? Okay. So to reiterate what the doctor said, the good doctor said, right? So what they did with woke and BLM, right? So with the propaganda, you know, they've been doing this for the longest, right? In history, now they with the racial tropes, the same thing they did with black people with watermelon and with chicken, right? We couldn't own anything, so we were the sharecroppers, the farmers. We planted the watermelons and we sold them, and we cooked the chicken, because that's the only livestock that we were able to have. Therefore, whites seen black people making money off of these things and then turn them into racial tropes. So these same systematic things are happen to this day with woke, and they did with BLM. Now, granted,
the Me Too movement.
It started off in the right place, but overall, once it got into the wrong hands, that's exactly what they will do. Like she said, with the whole thing with Black Power, with white power, that started with COINTELPRO. The only way you infiltrate is you use someone who look like you to get into the organization, right? Yeah. There's even video documentation where the white CIA agents would come to Malcolm X property and say, hey, if we give you but so much money to flip on the nation, we will leave you alone. Malcolm X right-hand man, Bates or Barnes, whatever, someone said, look, you need to start recording these things. And I've literally heard documents. The CIA has a big files this thick on everything. So go ahead, AJ. What you got to say?
Let me just say one last thing, and then I'll let you get in there. Also, her statement is so preposterous because it's like there was probably like 80% of people who went along with slavery.
Of course.
At the end of the day. And so they agreed with it.
Yes.
And until like the 1850s.
It was in law.
You know, people were down with it. Like it was like, oh yeah, whatever.
That's how the whole
they
US
didn't really care
from it. From New York to saying where you were so-called free, they all benefited. That's why I'm like, girl.
When you go, I'm in Jay, I'm sorry.
The lack of accountability.
When you go into the 13 colonies, as she said, right? Yeah. I did a lot of tours. I did some studying. At one time in the 13th colony, South Carolina, where we at, Charleston was the richest. Because of the barrier islands and the wetlands is the only way you can grow rice. White people, even in Europe, never even had rice, never even saw it. So they saw this export and they started sending it out. Charleston became the richest out of the 13th colonies, hence why they were one of the forefathers in pushing the Civil War to keep our black people still enslaved.
Free labor.
Yeah. Go ahead, AG.
No, all great conversations, but I'm going to be the bad guy about not just Jillian Michaels, but this notion that woke or speaking about authentic history is problematic. Woke didn't go too far. What happened is we live in a country that has never acknowledged its sins.
Of course.
Yep.
This country, the founding fathers are credited with creation of America, and at the same time that they wrote the documents basically demanding their freedom from a colonial power in England, they had our ancestors enslaved, enriching them. The vast majority of the people who came here to found this country were the outcasts of Europe. And so to have someone say, oh, well, slavery existed around the world, American chattel slavery is recognized as the most brutal form of slavery. But as you're talking about, and I'm glad you brought that point up, Josiah, while it may have been a small percentage that actually owned, the larger percentage didn't do anything to free them.
Exactly.
And so what Jillian sounds like 5 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a movement that very few people saw. And it was in the height of anti-mask, anti-vax conversations. That movement was white women going to school board meetings primarily and then city council meetings. And they were saying, oh, this is fascism. We don't want that. But then they were then talking about, and our kids are learning about this in school, and not enough people paid attention to it.
They were part of the Daughters of the Confederacy.
Well, they were moms for liberty, right? Which is modern day. And what they did, not what they tried to do, what they did through the help of people like Chris Rufo and folks at PragerU, they planted these seeds that sound exactly like what Jillian Michaels is saying. They started getting books banned in schools. They started not just banning books. Here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize. They started banning words. CRT, which is an academic framework that's taught at graduate levels in law schools, was the word that they used. But what they were really trying to get to is what they later settled on, which was DEI. But because racism is a clumsy thing, they didn't know how to put it together. So they used CRT and then woke. It's the woke mind virus. It's the woke mob. But what they were talking about was, you're making us recognize the humanity of other groups that we have dehumanized, right? So what happened was you literally had school districts, including Charleston County, where people stood up and said, we don't want our children getting any programming for socio-emotional learning. There's literally church sermons that are online right now where you have people in a pulpit saying empathy is a bad thing. You got all of this. So it wasn't that woke went too far. What happened is we're at a point in time in history where we've got access to more information than we probably have ever had. And because people in the past have been able to suppress more, they found themselves losing control. So what do? Oh, this is woke. And people who don't think, people who are lazy intellectually, and people who have not checked their own racial bias, they're going to go with that because now you're saying, oh, you're white. You didn't have slaves. He wasn't a slave. So why are you responsible for racism? Well, you're ignoring, like you said, the 80% of people who did. You're ignoring the fact that modern day corporations like Wells Fargo and several insurance companies were enriched because of this, or the fact that right now in America, we don't have federal hate crime laws. Very few states where we had a church where 10 black people were killed and slaughtered by a young man who came down and wrote in his manifesto. A lot of people don't realize this. He wrote in his manifesto as a white kid, he went to a poor school and he wasn't able to go to the good school, and he felt like people were more concerned with black folks than him. These are the things that, that's why Jillian Michaels don't want us to talk about that. They don't want to walk through a museum and see the vestiges of what they have yet to face.
Exactly.